it from someone who's been through the education system in India and then partly through the education system in the US as well. The kind of exposure that you're all getting, the kind of debate, pros and cons, the points that I heard today from both the parties, the kind of exposure in terms of the metrics that you're talking about, the statistics that you're talking about is phenomenal. It's a very different kind of an education that's been imparted today. And I wish we had started this a little bit earlier in our lives. And a degree was not a degree just for the sake of it. I see some nodding heads, but the appreciation should be large amongst everybody who's sitting here. Education is beyond just getting the BSc, BS, BA, BCom, B engineering degree. It is about learning how to live your life and learning to live life in its full potential. I learned that a little bit late, and I feel that I learned that more from my father than I learned it from my education institutions, and I'm hoping that for you guys it's going to be slightly different. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about the changes that we've seen in the country over the last 12 years. We started, and while I talk to you about what has happened in India, let me talk a little bit about my journey as well, as somebody who started a startup when startup was not even a word. I finished my education in India, went to the US, got my MBA, decided that I wanted to work for one of the largest organizations in the country, an investment bank called Goldman Sachs. How many of you have heard about Goldman Sachs? And I can tell you why I wanted to work with Goldman Sachs, because it paid the most. The highest salary was with them. Why should I go work for somebody who's going to pay me less when I can go work for the best as well? I'll tell you what happened in my first interview there. They used to have a concept called a Super Friday. That means that you went in for an interview, and there are 9 interviews through the day. So you start with interview 1, and you go from different room to room. Each one interview is different. And there were about 60 of us who were brought in for 6 positions, and we were all waiting in the waiting room outside. And I remember feeling extremely stressed because I was the only Indian there, and I was amongst 5 women in that group, out of which 4 were blonde and just exceedingly beautiful white girls. And I'm standing there feeling extremely out of place, sitting there feeling extremely out of place. I had just moved to the US about a year ago. Their accents were different, their exposure was different. They had parents who had possibly worked at the firm already. For me, it was coming from a background where nobody had worked in corporate India. I'm from a through and through army background. Anybody here from an army background? Hats off. KV? Okay, guys, yoo-hoo to KV. But it was, I sat there and मेरा confidence minute by minute गिरते जा रहा था. I was stressed that I'm never going to get this job because I'm not good enough. Because there are so many other people who've trained for this job their entire life. And now I'll tell you something really stupid that happened. They told us all to get up and move into the auditorium, a very similar setting like this, so they could tell us a little bit about the company. I stood up and I realized I was wearing about 4-inch heels, and I realized that I was one of the tallest people in the room. And I just took energy from that. So whatever works for you, take inspiration from that and move for it. I got the job. In fact, I was just remembering yesterday was 9/11 a couple of days ago, and I was in New York when 9/11 happened at the Goldman office. Life-changing moment completely. And just working at Goldman was a life-changing moment. But I think the biggest lesson for me from such a minor thing was that You can do anything that you want to do. You just have to believe in yourself. We moved back to India in 2011 to start ShopClues at a time when startups were not common. How many of you have heard of ShopClues? How many have shopped at ShopClues? Okay, more power to that. So when we moved back, we'd worked nearly there were 4 of us who were the co-founders, and we'd worked in the US all our adult life. We'd never effectively worked in India. And we came back to a country that had changed significantly over the decade and a half that we'd been gone. And I remember coming back and thinking that we're coming back to Bharat Desh, hamara desh hai, hum jahan bade hue the wahi desh hai. But it had changed. And yet not changed enough. The concept of ease of doing business was very different. We started the company in the United States. The first company, ShopClues, was started in the United States. We set up a subsidiary here in India. I started a second company with my then husband called Droom. That we started in Singapore in 2015. I'm on to my third company, Kind Life. The first one, when we set up the process and we started the subsidiary, it took 4 months to do that. The second one, it took us 2.5 months. This time around, in 2 days, my company was ready to go. The change is real. The change is visible. You also have to understand, as entrepreneurs, we are possibly one of the toughest audience there is and the biggest critics of the government. So when we say that we see the change, I can tell you the change has to be 100 for us to be happy to a point of 50. And I think that's true for students as well. It is a tough audience that's there. We just ended G20, and I heard some of the debaters talk about Sarke Band Thi, how does that work for the economy, etc., etc. There are some things that are an extreme moment of pride for us. This was one of them. I saw my father feel incredibly proud for this. I saw me feel incredibly proud for this. And I saw my 14-year-old feel incredibly proud about this. We executed an impeccable G20. Impeccable. I have been part of some of the G20 summits. The conversations were with us as equals. Please know that we grew up in a country where we were always the developing economy. We are not a developing economy anymore. We are ready to make an impact on the country. Today, I want to talk a little bit about startups, and this is a great presentation, but I'll tell you my story along with it as well, and how it actually, each one of these has made an impact on my life personally. I am here today because of this. Why did we start ShopClues? We were working in the US. I worked at Goldman, then I worked at Nordstrom. My co-founders worked at Citigroup. They worked at Collins Stewart. They worked at eBay. They worked at Richemont. Very great companies, large companies. 2 of them had been to IIT. One of them from IIT BHU, one from IIT Delhi, one from IIT Mumbai, making $1 million salaries. Yet we moved back to India to do a startup. Why did we do that? We'd heard about what was happening in the US, right? What is a startup? I'm assuming everybody knows what a startup is. Shark Tank किस-किसने देखा है? बस फिर इन लोगों को तो कुछ बताने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. You're all caught up already. How many of you are ready to pitch at Shark Tank? You are? I'm going to listen to your pitch. I have angel invested in about 30 companies. If it's good, I'll write you a check. Done? Okay. And that's a startup, guys. To have the courage to say, yes, I'm doing something, when nobody else lifts their hands. And we saw that happening in the US. We saw people talking about LinkedIn. We saw people talking about Uber, Tesla. We saw people talking about eBay, Amazon, the biggest impact that had ever been done. We also came back to India and saw the change truly happening, which is one of our first startups that went public. Do you guys know? And I can bet you most of you have used them. They went public in the US in 2008. Make My Trip. किसने यूज किया Make My Trip? बस. That's it. We came to India, and it's all serendipity, right? We came to India on chutti. We met the Make My Trip team at a party. And I remember meeting Deep and thinking, भाई इसने तो बहुत अच्छी कंपनी बना ली, इंडिया में बना ली, हम लोग वहाँ कैलिफोर्निया में बैठे हुए काम किए जा रहे हैं. It is possible to do something in India. India is truly changing. And that was it. That was the genesis for us at ShopClues as well. That was the Praramb, literally. And I can tell you, over the last few 15 odd years, I have seen the change happen from year to year, decade to decade, day to day, month to month. When we started, what was happening was that we would go talk to investors, and they all wanted to know why we are not doing this in the US, which has a paying population, versus doing it in India, जहाँ पे 1.3 billion लोग हैं, पर paying capacity बहुत कम है. And within 2 to 3 years, I can tell you that the change that happened was that the 1.3 billion people, and this is especially for the people who were pro-democracy right there, the 1.3 people were not being looked at as a burden, they were being looked at as an opportunity. The same thing that was a problem became a benefit for us. Our pitch at ShopClues changed exactly the same way. And that was the beginning of the reforms, the beginning of the startup story at India. Firstly, it was possible कि technology से real change आ सकता है. हमें लगा था हम इंडिया आएंगे, company start करेंगे, and it will be like the field hockey stick. It will take us a little bit of teething trouble, and then we'll just take off like that. We landed up being more and more like the Canadian hockey stick, flat, 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 and then it took off. And do you know what is the catalyst? What was one of the biggest reform that made the change possible? Very different generation. But there was a time जब लोग अपने phone पे data on नहीं करते थे क्योंकि data महंगा होता था. Jio. Jio was a big one. Jandhan. The Jam Trinity that the government launched. For some of you, that might just be a phrase. For us, that was what built the business. That's what got people online. Today, UPI is being used across the world. When it launched, there were questions about whether it will be successful in any way or form. So reforms that had to be done were very, very, very significant, even before Startup India was announced. That was the biggest thing. For me, this is a moment of extreme pride. I was on the stage and Prime Minister Modi was listening to me talk about what my aspirations for my country were. And it doesn't matter if you're for the government, you're against the government. That is a sense of huge pride when your words are being listened to by your leadership and when they are ready to take your feedback. Modi ji started this evening, this was a Saturday evening, and we started at about 7 o'clock. And I remember he started by saying कि अगर Saturday शाम को आप लोग 7 बजे मेरा भाषण सुनने आए हैं तो आप लोग entrepreneurs ही हो सकते हैं. पर मुझे लगता है अगर 7 बजे Saturday शाम को 7 बजे आप भाषण सुनने आए तो you are ready to make a change. Now, I saw the enthusiasm when a lot of your speakers came on board today. And I have to tell you, I miss this. I miss the energy of youth, the belief that anything is possible. I also have to say that I was expecting a lot more people to put their hands up and say we have business ideas than just one. Because that's what our country should be about. Startups are important. Businesses are important. And a shout out to all the women in the room. Bhai, thoda sa ideas lao. The time has come. Really anything is possible. You don't have to limit yourself. Unicorns. Does everybody know what a unicorn is? What is it? 1 billion की वैल्यूएशन. बिल्कुल. जब हमने 2011 में ShopClues शुरू किया था, तब Make My Trip was successful, Flipkart था, and they were all valued at 200, 400 odd million. There was no unicorn in India. And we didn't think, because there's no other unicorn in the country, you don't think that you'll become a unicorn as well. But it happened. 2013, Mu Sigma became a unicorn. Flipkart, InMobi, InfoEdge, Make My Trip, Zoho, Renew, Hike, ShopClues, Paytm, Quicker, Zomato, Ola, Snapdeal. Have you guys used services of most of these companies? So together, the kind of valuation, the kind of impact they've made on our country, can you also see yourself working at these companies? Okay, let me go to the next page. Can you see yourself working at these companies? Yes? अब आप देखें कितने यूनिकॉर्न बन गए हैं. Do you know what the next step to a unicorn is? क्या? Decacorn, किसी ने सुना है? $10 billion. We have multiple companies that are $10 billion companies now. And there are multiple companies out of these that have gone public as well. How many of you invest in the public market? Or at least follow the public market? Delivery? Zomato? Good stock? Not a good stock? Long-term good stock? Can be, no? I think it's a long-term good stock. I've bought into Zomato. I'm pretty proud of it. And look at what happened in 2021 and 22. Guys, मुझे पता है तुम लोग मेरी इंडस्ट्री के नहीं हो. Please, a big hand. Look at the value that was created here. How many unicorns? Lots of data. But the fact is, वो वाला date है ना, 16 January 2016. उस दिन ये announce हो गया कि तुम company 2 दिन में बना सकते हो. And India used to have the license Raj. मतलब कुछ नहीं होता था. I don't know if there are any government officers here or not, but Really कुछ नहीं होता था. और वो really change हो गया है. You know, half the time I'm a non-believer in a lot of these. But this is a change that I've seen. This happened. Regulatory reforms happened. You know, one of the reforms that they made that was very important for the startup culture to kind of grow and prosper in the country. They made it easier for companies to fail. You could shut down companies easier. पहले अगर तुम्हारी कंपनी बनी नहीं तो तुम्हारे गले पे टंगी रहती थी. मतलब you were just all your life working on figuring out how you can shut that. Your risk appetite went up. It became easier for people to take risks, to start new things. So while making it easy to start is important, making it easier to fail is also very important. And that's what the government did for us. Investment has become easier. I'll also tell you a personal story in investments over here. When we started ShopClues, I must have pitched to about, 500 odd investors. And, okay, I have to stay towards the middle of the stage. But 500 odd investors. And out of that, I think 2 or 3 women, that's about it. Now, when I go for events, my finance minister is a woman, Ms. Sitaraman, and I meet many, many more women on VCs as well. Because it has become easier from the government side to be able to start new funds that are focused on women, start new funds that are focused on agri-tech, start new funds that are focused on defense. The government has made it easier to do that, and we've not seen this kind of a push in any of the other countries anywhere. Most countries push their startup ecosystem based on tax benefits. We've made it easier from a regulatory process, which was one of the biggest things that was holding us back. There is the Startup Learning Program, Startup India Hub. No angel tax. Angel tax was a very big problem. Some of it continues to be there, which is being some legacy impact is there that's being resolved. But hopefully that gets a lot better as well. मेरे हिसाब से तो सबसे easy था भाई, funding support for startups and innovation-focused programs for students. Have you guys seen any innovation-focused programs? How many of you have heard about the Atal Tinkering Lab? Did your schools have it? Have you actually tinkered in the lab? Yes? Somebody said yes. Who said yes? Atal Tinkering Lab, what did you do? Robotics. So I'm a mentor for a couple of these, and I think it is the ability that the Atal Tinkering Labs, the Atal Innovation Labs provide the students today at so many schools across the country is phenomenal. The change is real, the change is here for us, and a lot of innovative ideas are coming out of this. I go to schools in Delhi where I hear business ideas from kids as young as in grade 6. They talk about building, whether that is in drones, whether that's in robotics, whether that's in 3D printing. Dimag khul jata hai when you have the resources. I'll go back to the same thing. We're not a developing nation anymore. We're not a poor nation. We're a nation that is actually opening up its resources to our young, to our students. So incentives are being provided, ease of doing business, tax benefits, exit options I've already spoken about, infrastructure, the startup policy. All of these sound easy on paper, but If any of you go out and start a business, you'll realize how important all of these are, and these literally become roadblocks for us to do anything big with our life. Let's talk about incubators and accelerators. Have you applied to any of the incubators? Check चाहिए ना तुम्हें तो जवाब देना पड़ेगा. हाँ किया था ना. तो 2011 में जब हमने शॉपक्लूज शुरू किया था, कोई इंक्यूबेटर नहीं था, कोई एक्सेलरेटर नहीं था. आज आई एम बैंगलोर में एक एक्सेलरेटर है जिसमें से every year about 150 women owned enterprises, consumer tech enterprises come out. There are multiple accelerators around the world. The government has a fund of funds that enables us to be able to fund those as well. IITs में research parks बन रहे हैं. Incubators are in schools, but they are also being sponsored by SIDBI. They are being sponsored by a lot of the government-focused initiatives. By the way, guys, please, I hope I leave here with a lot more people aspiring to be entrepreneurs. It's a lot easier in today's generation. Make the attempt. हर रोज घर जाके ना चार ideas लिखा करो जो कर सकते हो. And at the end of the month or at the end of the year, go through it and figure out which one you can work on. Because it's truly possible. Truly, truly. So when you guys are thinking of your ideas, let me talk to you a little bit about what are the biggest industries through which these ideas are coming. IT services. Do you understand IT services? Healthcare. Have hospitals become better in your lifetime? Do any of you use healthcare apps? Mindplus, great. I heard a yes here as well. 1mg, Practo, Apollo. Great. It's impacting our lives, right? Making our lives easier. Education. तुम लोग तो एकदम PW, physics वाला, hands down. कि Byju's. Khan Academy. आप लोग यहाँ पे आप यूज करते हैं? Agriculture. Anybody knows of an agriculture-based startup? Dehat. Which one did you say? ENAP. Animal. There you go. Professional and commercial services. So B2B services. Moglix. India Mart. Any more? Meesho nahi yaar, Meesho to hardcore B2C. Food and beverages. Zomato, Swiggy. Construction, finance, fintech, technology, hardware, renewable energy, Blue Smart. Do we have Blue Smart here in Sonipat? Delhi tak hi hai. Par acha hai na? Prefer that now over any of that. Any day. Any day. Any day. This list. Ignore everything. This list. These are investors. Just the VCs in our country have gone up at least 100 times over the last 14 years. People would be afraid to invest in India. Now, sometimes I feel there are more funds than founders. Sahil and I were talking about it earlier. When I was growing up, I would ask my parents for anything and they'd say, "Hum Tata Birla thodi hain." पर अब तो और भी हो गया ना. You can be a Flipkart founder. You can be a Snapdeal founder. You can be a Zomato founder. Wealth is not limited to a few. If you can create it, it can be yours. I've spoken about agri startups already. Drones. Garud. Anybody knows about drone technology? What's happening there? There you go. Idea Forge. Garud. It is phenomenal that what we are doing in the drone technology is ahead of a lot of things that are happening worldwide. Because we've been known, India also had its whole evolution. We were a country of traders, so it was assumed that any kind of a company that comes out of India is going to be the eBay of India, the Amazon of India. Now we are coming out with startups that are from India for the world. Space tech, so much happening in space tech right now. Galaxy Eye, which is a space tech startup, that has unveiled India's first high-resolution aerial drone startup. And it is one of the first of its kind in the world. When I read this, it makes me incredibly proud. It took us about 5 years to create a unicorn in India. We were the 4th unicorn in India. Now unicorns, the median age is 5.7, but I know that there are companies like Bharat Pay that have become unicorns in less than 2 to 3 years. There's another one that's one of the youngest unicorn. One more that you guys probably use. Who has credit cards here? Great job, cred. Within 2 to 3 years, they are startups. They are unicorns. और ये सब बहुत ही phenomenal change है. ये हो नहीं रहा था पहले. Today, we have more than 100 unicorns in the country and about 100 more that are waiting to be unicorns. We've raised a total capital of nearly $100 billion in a country where FDI, foreign direct investment, was difficult, but has changed completely. We've been able to raise $100 billion and created a combined valuation of about $350 billion. And I feel that this data is slightly dated. This number has gone up significantly. The top sector that has created value has been e-commerce, but fintech is catching up very, very soon, only because of one phenomena, which is UPI. आप सब UPI use करते हैं? That's technology. Paytm. There you go. That's life-changing. So we sometimes forget the impact that startups have on our day-to-day lives. So when I already told you that when we started ShopClues, the question that we got was that why are you moving to India? India mein to bahut mushkil hai to build anything. And that era has passed. Now there are people who are US citizens, Americans, Israelis who come to India to do their startups. 1 out of every 10 unicorns globally have been born in India right now. And I can tell you that this number is going to go up to 50% very, very soon. Some more just data out there. One data that I'm not very pleased with, only 46% of startups have at least one woman director, but less than 4% of startup money goes to women-led startups. So less than 4% of venture capital goes to women-led startups. That number has to change, and it will, because we have incentives to be able to change that. Just a stark comparison of how the funding has changed completely. We became a unicorn the year after this. तब तक सिर्फ 5 बिलियन आया था. अब नंबर आपके सामने है कितना आ चुका है. तब हम मुश्किल से 350-400 स्टार्टअप्स थे. अब every nook and corner has a startup, and that is, again, I think just the ability to start easy and the ability to fail easy. That is pretty phenomenal. And unicorns are more an outcome than anything else, but the fact is, okay, I should have gone according to that, but sorry. Okay, we're just stuck here, but Amritkal, Amritkal, Amritkal. We've heard that phrase often. I think it truly is an Amritkal. Light चली गई. ठीक है, आएगा अमृतकाल, जल्दी आएगा. ये तो नहीं गया. I think this part, right, we've talked about, don't focus on anything else over here. Just focus on that. From job seekers, become job creators. Again, guys, think of ideas. Become entrepreneurs. It is the best time in our country to become an entrepreneur. At your age, at my age. And this has not been true in any other part of the world. In any other part of the world. Train yourself to become a good employee, but train yourself better to become a good founder. It is not difficult, and it is not impossible. The days of Tata Birla have gone. Please become a Flipkart founder, become a Zomato founder, become a Cred founder. These are your role models today. That's the most important thing. Demography of startup founders, we've already talked about the fact that we have fewer women entrepreneurs and more encouragement for women entrepreneurs to be able to do startups. And आप लोग तो यहाँ पे है ना, 20 to 25 years old. Is that right? That's your demographic? 18 too. Okay, let's add the 0.3%. Zepto, guys, क्या age है पता है ना? There you go. So please, my job today is to leave here making sure that you all understand that being an entrepreneur is an option for you all. The country is ripe for it. Entrepreneurs literally come in all ages, all shapes and sizes. You don't have to be an engineering graduate or an MBA. You can be any of those and do something that makes an impact. The impact is not just in terms of the money that you make, but the impact is more in terms of the lives that you touch as well. Nine years, I have seen the change. For me, this is not rhetoric. This has changed my life. I'm on to my third startup in a country which has been able to implement all of this. I've spoken about nearly each one of these individually, and I'll leave this here for you to read. But any ecosystem that gets support from the government, whether that's a government that is a democracy or a government that's not a democracy, that has to sponsor, that has to prosper. Today's day and era, I think it is a time for India to shine. Truly our Amrit Kal. You guys are in a very different country that we were in when we were growing up, and it is up to you to make the most out of the opportunity. I want to wish you all good luck. I'm happy to take any questions, but please tell me how many of you will at least try to do a startup. Oh my God. Thank you.